The Crown Manhattan was not the kind of place where tempers flared, at least not openly. Its walls had heard secrets of billion-dollar mergers, seen the silent crumbling of marriages, and witnessed subtle power plays disguised as polite laughter over champagne flutes. However, its air never vibrated with the sharp sound of a hand striking human skin. It happened so fast that the entire dining hall seemed to freeze mid-gesture. Forks hovered in the air. Wine glasses paused just short of lips. Conversations broke like fragile glass, shattered by the violence of that moment. Slap. The sound cracked through the restaurant, echoing off crystal chandeliers and mirrored walls. Diners turned as one, their faces reflecting horror, curiosity, and guilty fascination. Their eyes landed on a table near the tall windows, where the city glittered like a restless sea of diamonds. There, a woman sat stunned, her dark skin glowing under the golden lights, her simple navy dress making her look delicate and defiant. Her hand had not yet risen to touch the cheek that burned from the blow. She stared at the woman standing over her. Patricia Hamilton. Tall, blonde, perfectly coiffed, wrapped in white Chanel, she loomed above the seated woman, like a queen, furious at a peasant's insolence. Her manicured finger trembled with the remnants of rage as she hissed through clenched teeth. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who I am?" The words rolled across the room with a chill that even the expensive heating could not dissolve. People whispered. Some fumbled for their phones. A few raised them, already recording. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Mia Norris did not flinch. Her chest rose and fell as she fought the instinctive flood of humiliation. She had grown up in Baltimore, in neighborhoods where slurs were thrown like stones, where prejudice was sharp enough to cut skin. She had learned long ago how to stand still when the world tried to push her down. But she could not stop the sting of the slap. Her cheek throbbed. Her ear rang. Her throat tightened with heat. She wanted to cry. She refused. Patricia's eyes blazed, lips curling into something between a sneer and a satisfied smile. Around her, silence had become a throne. She believed she had won. For one suspended moment, Mia was alone against the weight of the entire room. And then, "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The voice did not shout. It did not need to. Low, steady, threaded with such fury that every diner felt it vibrate through the marble floors. The words cut through the silence like a blade through silk. Mia's heart stumbled inside her chest. She knew that voice. She would know it in the dark in dreams, when her world felt too heavy. Her husband, Owen Gordon. He stood at the edge of their table, tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal suit tailored to perfection, yet unable to contain the storm radiating from him. His green eyes that had once only softened for her, were now two shards of emerald fire locked on Patricia Hamilton. Every head in the restaurant turned again, not just in curiosity, but in recognition. Whispered names skittered like sparks across the tables. Owen Gordon. Gordon Tech. Worth billions. Some diners gasped. Others pressed phones tighter to trembling hands. Patricia's smirk faltered. Her face blanched. Her manicured hand trembled in the air, still half raised from the strike. For the first time that night, she looked unsure. But Owen did not give her room for certainty. He stepped closer, his presence filling the air like an approaching storm. One hand slid gently onto Mia's shoulder, protective, claiming, trembling with restrained rage. "My wife," he repeated, voice heavier now, carrying steel and finality. "You put your hands on my wife." The words detonated through the room. Murmurs exploded. Diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. More phones rose, red dots blinking to life as cameras recorded. Mia felt a tremor run through her, relief tangled with fear. Relief that he was here. fear of what his anger might unleash. Patricia's lips opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for water. Her eyes darted from Owen's searing glare to Mia's tear-bright face, then back again. She had expected compliant submission. She had not expected to stand accused by one of the most powerful men in Manhattan. The dining room had transformed into a stage, and every diner was an unwilling audience. Forks clinked back onto plates. Champagne bubbles fizzed unnoticed. Even the violinist in the corner faltered, his bow slipping off the strings as the tension consumed every sound but breath. Mia could feel the pressure of those eyes pressing down on her, as though the slap were still echoing on her cheek. She wanted to speak to reclaim her voice, but words tangled in her throat. Owen's hand tightened slightly on her shoulder, grounding her. He had once said she steadied him, pulled him back from the chaos of empire and ambition. Tonight, he was her anchor. Patricia finally found her voice. It emerged, brittle, desperate. I didn't know. I didn't realize she was what Owen's voice snapped across her stammer like lightning. Was human. Was she worthy of respect only if she belonged to me? Gasps rippled again. Patricia paled further. Mia closed her eyes briefly, swallowing the wave of emotion. This was not how she wanted to be defended through wealth, through reputation. She wanted to be seen for who she was, not merely whose wife she was. And yet, in that moment, she needed Owen's fury, his presence, his refusal to let the slap go unanswered. As Patricia trembled under Owen's gaze, Mia's mind slipped for a fleeting second to the girl she had once been. Baltimore, age 12. A grocery store clerk had refused to hand her mother the receipt, muttering something about people like you. Mia had watched her mother swallow her pride, forcing a smile and retreating silently. That night her mother whispered, "Sometimes silence keeps us safe, baby." Mia had promised herself she would not always be silent. Yet here she was, her cheek stinging, her voice caught. But tonight was different. Tonight she had a partner who refused silence. At a corner table a couple whispered, "That's Owen Gordon. His company changed the way Wall Street runs." She hid his wife. Another diner murmured, "This will be everywhere by morning." The servers stood frozen trays balanced like scales in midair. Even the manager had appeared pale and unsure whether to intervene or vanish. The Crown Manhattan had become a courtroom, and Patricia Hamilton stood on trial. The sting in Mia's cheek was sharp, but the knowledge that everyone was waiting and waiting was still sharper, to see if she would shatter or rise, waiting to see if the slap defined her. Her fingers trembled against the linen tablecloth. She drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. And when she opened her eyes, she lifted her chin. Not high, not arrogant, but steady. "I don't need your permission to be here," she said softly. Her voice carried clear in the silence. "And I don't need anyone's title to justify my worth." The room shifted. Murmurs hushed. Even Owen's hand eased slightly, pride flickering across his fury. Patricia stared at her, as though struck again this time, not by hand, but by the calm defiance of the woman she had tried to belittle. But Patricia was not finished. Entitlement is rarely surrendered quietly. Her chest rose, lips curled, and venom gathered behind her tongue. And Owen, God help her, looked ready to unleash every ounce of his empire in Mia's defense. The night at the Crown Manhattan was far from over. The slap had been only the beginning. Before we continue, take a breath with me. Imagine yourself in Mia's place, sitting alone, judged by eyes that do not know you, dismissed by a hand that believes it holds more worth than your life. And then imagine someone stepping into the storm for you, not because of who you belong to, but because of who you are. If stories like this move you, if they remind you of the power of dignity, love, and courage, don't forget to support this journey. A simple, like a comment about where you're watching from, or a follow, means more than you think. It tells us that these stories matter, that they reach hearts as well as screens. Now, let's return to the crown, where the night is about to spiral into revelations no one in that glittering restaurant could have predicted. The late October sun spilled across Manhattan in ribbons of gold sliding down the glass towers and warming the autumn air. From the 39th floor of the Gordon penthouse on the Upper East Side, the city looked like a vibrant, endless, alive painting. Inside, however, the air was quiet or heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mia Norris stood before her walk-in closet, her fingers grazing across silk velvet and chiffon. Designers whispered from the hangers, Valentino Dior Armani. Each garment was a piece of armor that Owen had insisted she accept, even though she rarely wore them. But tonight, she bypassed them all, reaching for a navy blue cotton dress that hung humbly among the glitter. It was knee-length, modest, and unpretentious. Comfortable. Real. She pressed the fabric to her chest almost in defiance of the luxury around her. This one she murmured more to herself than to anyone else. This feels right. From the adjoining bathroom came the rush of water, then Owen's voice floating through the steam. Mia, love, are you almost ready? Our reservation is for 7:30. If we're late, the crown might give away our table to some senator's wife. She smiled faintly. He always teased, but his voice carried that soft Boston lilt he had never lost. It made him sound almost boyish. A man who hadn't yet built an empire worth billions. A man who had once sat across from her at a small cafe in Baltimore, listening to her talk about literacy programs, as if that mattered more than any fortune. She slipped the dress over her shoulders, feeling its simple fabric mold to her curves. She didn't want to be dazzling tonight. She wanted to be herself, the woman who had known scarcity, carried library books home in the rain, and fought for children to believe in their voices. She wanted to remember that version of Mia, not lose her, beneath the layers of someone else's definition of belonging. Her reflection stared back from the mirror. Warm brown skin, dark eyes framed by lashes that needed no mascara, lips set in quiet determination. She touched the silver necklace Owen had given her on their second anniversary, a single pendant, understated like a promise, whispered rather than shouted. The bathroom door opened. Steam spilled out, carrying the scent of Owen's cologne, cedar, and smoke, masculine grounding. He appeared, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal gray suit, his hair damp, his jaw freshly shaven. At 36, Owen Gordon was a man who commanded attention without effort. His presence filled any space, his green eyes carrying a kind of sharp intelligence that had built Gordon Tech from a dorm room idea into a multinational empire. But tonight those eyes softened when they found her. You look. His voice faltered just for a moment. He closed the distance, sliding his hands to her waist. Beautiful. You always do. Mia leaned into his touch, though she caught something else flickering behind his compliment: concern. The kind of concern that spoke of conversations they had had before, of nights when she had stood in front of these mirrors, debating whether she was enough. You want me to wear the Prada? She said quietly, not accusing, simply knowing. Owen sighed, resting his forehead against hers. I want you to wear whatever makes you happy. But Mia, you know what the crown is like. People there judge before they even blink. I don't want anyone to treat you with anything less than the respect you deserve. Her heart clenched. She knew he meant well. She knew his words came from love. But she also knew the undercurrent, the fear that she would be judged not just as his wife, but as a woman who did not fit the mold of billionaire society. Owen. She straightened his tie, though it was already perfect. Her fingers lingered there, as if touching the silk could tether her to him. If I change into something else, doesn't that mean they've already won? His thumb brushed her cheek, tender but firm. I fell in love with the woman who wore a $15 dress to a coffee shop in Baltimore and made it look like the most elegant gown in the world. Don't change for them. Don't even change for me. Memories flickered between them, how she had been laughing with a barista about education inequality when he first saw her, the passion in her voice, the spark in her eyes. He had been drawn not to what she wore, but to who she was. That truth had lit the foundation of their love. She smiled, though her chest was tight. Are you sure? Because once we walk in there, you know the looks we'll get. I'm sure, he said, kissing her forehead. And if anyone dares, they'll have to answer to me. When they left the penthouse, the sky had deepened into indigo, and Manhattan glowed like a restless constellation. The Bentley slid smoothly through the streets, headlights carving paths between taxis and buses. Mia watched the city pass by, the boutiques, glittering with unattainable price tags, the lobbies of hotels where doorkeepers bowed to wealth, the pedestrians bundled against the crisp air. Are you nervous? Owen asked, his hand finding hers across the center console. She hesitated a little. I always feel like I'm wearing a costume in places like the Crown. His fingers tightened over hers. You belong everywhere I belong. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. She wanted to believe him, but deep down she carried a quiet fear that no matter how much he loved her, or how fiercely he defended her, the world would always look at her and see someone who didn't belong. The Crown Manhattan rose like a temple of glass, and light discreetly grand its entrance lined with polished marble. A valet in crisp black opened Mia's door, as if she were royalty. She stepped out, smoothing the navy cotton dress against her thighs. Around her, women shimmered in gowns embroidered with sequins and dripping diamonds. The contrast was sharp, undeniable. Inside, the restaurant glowed with warm lighting and hushed conversations. The air smelled faintly of truffle and aged wine. Servers glided between tables like shadows carrying crystal and silver. At the maitre d's greeting, Mr. Gordon. Mrs. Gordon, your table is ready. Heads turned subtly, discreet curiosity following them as they walked. Mia felt the weight of those glances, the silent measuring of fabric jewelry skin. She inhaled slowly, remembering Owen's words. You belong everywhere I belong. They reached their table by the window. The city stretched endlessly outside, lights flickering like stars at their feet. For a moment she felt steady, believing she could exhale into the night. Then Owen's phone buzzed. He frowned. It's Tokyo, the Yamamoto deal. I need to take this. 5 minutes. She nodded, forcing a smile. Go. I'll be fine. He kissed her hair before striding to the bar area. Mia sat alone, the silverware gleaming before her, the murmurs around her rising and falling like waves. She reached for her water glass, feeling the coolness against her palm. And that was when she felt it, that weight, that stare. Across the room, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a body sculpted by salons and surgeons was watching her, and watching with a sharpness that cut deeper than curiosity. Patricia Hamilton's gaze lingered like a shadow, her lips curving with disdain. Mia's stomach tightened. She had seen that look before. It never led anywhere good. For several minutes, the world was a stage of silence. Mia tried to focus on her breathing, the candlelight flickering at her table, and the way Owen's laughter had once filled this same restaurant when they came on their first anniversary. But the stare did not leave her, and slowly, Patricia Hamilton rose from her seat. Her heels struck the floor in measured rhythm, a drumbeat of entitlement. Every step she took toward Mia felt inevitable, like the turning of a wheel she could not stop. Mia's hands clenched in her lap. She had survived so much worse: poverty, doubt, grief. But the way Patricia's eyes burned with practiced authority made her chest seize. Still, she did not move, because deep down, she knew tonight would test not only her strength, but also the foundation of her marriage. The restaurant glowed in golden light, its chandeliers scattering warm fire across polished crystal and velvet seats. Soft jazz swelled in the background, low and liquid mingling with the hum of conversations about gallery openings, hedge funds, and political favors. For most, it was an ordinary night at the Crown Manhattan. For Mia Norris, it was the moment she had feared without knowing she feared it. Patricia Hamilton was walking toward her. Mia had sensed it the moment the woman's eyes locked on her, blue, sharp, and cold, the kind of gaze that stripped dignity before a word was spoken. The sound of heels striking marble grew louder each step, declaring ownership of this space, as though the restaurant itself bowed to her presence. Patricia's white Chanel dress shimmered beneath the chandeliers, every detail curated to project control, the tennis bracelet catching firelight, the manicured nails painted in a shade that whispered money. She carried herself with the kind of authority that came not from character, but from the unquestioned entitlement of generations. And now all of that was directed at Mia. Mia tried to steady her breath, but her pulse betrayed her hammering in her throat. She smoothed her hands against her lap, the navy cotton dress cool beneath her fingertips. She reminded herself of Owen's words, "You belong everywhere I belong." Yet those words felt fragile against the intensity of Patricia's disdain. At last, Patricia stopped beside her table. The air between them tightened thick with expensive perfume, layered over something harsher. Arrogance, perhaps, or venom, disguised as civility. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice dripping with feigned politeness that fooled no one. Heads turned subtly around them, the ebb and flow of conversation beginning to hush. Mia lifted her gaze, meeting Patricia's eyes with quiet steadiness. "Yes, I believe there's been a mistake," Patricia continued, tilting her head as though she were explaining something to a child. "You seem to be sitting here alone. This table is reserved for sure guests, people who belong." The words landed with the weight of centuries, people who belong. Mia's hand tightened around her water glass, though her voice remained calm. "I'm waiting for my husband. He'll be back shortly." The answer should have ended it, but Patricia's lips curved into a brittle smile, loud enough for the surrounding diners to hear. "Your husband. How convenient. And who exactly is this mysterious man who leaves you unattended in a place like this?" A ripple moved through the room. Diners shifted eyes flicking between the two women. Conversations stilled into silence disguised as interest in their menus. Mia could feel the weight of their attention pressing on her skin, amplifying the dread curling in her stomach. "He stepped away to take a business call," Mia said firmly, though her fingers trembled slightly against the stem of her glass. "He'll return soon." "Oh, of course," Patricia said, laughter spilling brittle and sharp like a crystal goblet shattering. "The businessman husband. How quaint. And yet here you sit in a dress that looks like it came from a clearance rack, expecting people to believe you belong among senators and CEOs. The cruelty of it made Mia's cheeks burn. Around them, diners leaned closer, drawn into the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. Some wore pity, others quiet agreement, others the uncomfortable fascination of those watching a slow collision. Inside, Mia felt 12 years old again. Baltimore. A grocery store. A clerk refused her mother's money because she didn't look like she belonged. The shame of that memory, the way her mother's hands had trembled as she walked away, resurfaced with painful clarity. But Mia was no child now. She had vowed never to shrink again. She set her glass down carefully and lifted her chin. "I have every right to be here." Patricia's eyes flashed with irritation at Mia's composure. Entitlement expected submission. Defiance was intolerable. She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "Listen carefully, sweetheart. People like you don't just walk into the Crown. This is not some chain restaurant where anyone with $20 can buy a seat. This place has standards. And frankly, I can't imagine how someone dressed as plainly as you found her way into this dining room. The phrase, "people like you," burned through Mia like acid. It wasn't just about the dress. It was about her skin background and existence in this room. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "My husband made the reservation. I'm not lost." Patricia's laugh rang out again, brittle and cruel. "Not lost. Oh, darling, you're very lost. Just look around. Do you see anyone else here who looks remotely like you? You're out of your depth, out of your league, and everyone knows it." Mia felt the tremor of tears threatening hot at the back of her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. She could not cry here, in front of this woman who fed on humiliation. She said, "My clothes don't determine my worth," surprising even herself with the steel in her voice. Patricia arched a brow, smirking, as though the words were amusing. "Worth? Oh, honey, let me tell you about worth." She straightened her shoulders, projecting her voice now, making sure nearby tables heard every syllable. "I am Patricia Hamilton. My husband owns half the commercial real estate in Midtown. We donate more to charity in a year than you make in a decade. I know everyone who matters in this city, and I guarantee you, none of them would appreciate having their evening disrupted by some pretender playing dress-up." Her words sliced through the room, and Mia felt herself shrinking under the sheer force of them. She wanted to shout back to remind Patricia that giving to charity did not excuse cruelty, that real worth was measured in dignity, not dollars. But her voice caught tangled by the enormity of what she faced. Patricia leaned closer, her perfume thick in the air, her voice cold as marble. "Leave now quietly, and you can salvage what's left of your dignity. Stay, and I'll ensure everyone in this restaurant knows precisely what you are." The threat hung between them like a blade. Diners stared transfixed. The restaurant had become a theater, the stage set with velvet and crystal, the drama raw and honest. Mia's chest rose, fell. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape the humiliation, to flee before Patricia struck again, not with her hand, but with words designed to scar deeper than skin. But then, deep inside, another instinct stirred. A stubborn flame that had carried her through years of being underestimated, dismissed, and overlooked. She had survived poverty, discrimination, and doubt. She had fought for her students in underfunded schools, for her mother's dignity, for her own. Why should she surrender now? "I'm not leaving." Mia said, her voice quiet but steady. "I have every right to be here, and I will not go anywhere." The words seemed to slice the air itself. Gasps rippled across the room. Patricia's face flushed red, a storm of rage twisting her features. She had expected fear. She had not expected defiance. "How dare you speak to me that way?" Patricia shrieked, her voice rising to carry across the dining room. "Do you know who I am? I will not be insulted by anybody." The fury in her tone made Mia's stomach twist, but she did not lower her eyes. She sat taller, her back straight, her dignity intact, despite the tremble of her hands beneath the table. And then it happened. Patricia's hand rose fast as lightning, sharp with fury. The slap cracked through the restaurant like a gunshot echoing off the chandeliers. The sound silenced everything, the music, the whispers, even the clink of glasses. Mia's cheek exploded with fire. Her ears rang. Her breath caught in her throat. Around her the diners froze, some gasping aloud, others staring horrifiedly. Patricia stood above her chest, heaving, her blue eyes blazing with savage satisfaction. There she spat, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. "Now you'll understand that people like you don't belong here." The humiliation was a weight pressing down from every direction. Mia's cheek throbbed. Her lips tasted of copper. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. She felt the urge to crumble, to vanish, to dissolve under the crushing gaze of the crowd. But something inside her held her still. She was Mia Norris. She had survived worse, and she would not give Patricia Hamilton the victory of seeing her broken. For a heartbeat, time stopped. The diners stared, their faces mirrors of shock, discomfort, or morbid curiosity. Forks hung in midair. Wine glasses trembled in hands. Even the servers were statues, unsure whether to intervene or vanish. Mia raised her hand slowly, pressing trembling fingers against her burning cheek. The pain was sharp, real. And yet deeper still, the wound of public humiliation burned brighter. She lifted her eyes to Patricia, who stood over her, like a general victorious on the battlefield, chest rising with satisfaction. And then from behind her, a voice shattered the silence. Low, steady, filled with lethal fury. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" The words dropped into the silence like thunder. "Did you just put your hands on my wife?" Every head in the dining room turned at once. Forks clattered onto plates. The soft music had stopped, or perhaps it only seemed so, drowned out by the energy filling the space. Patricia Hamilton froze, her hands still poised in the air as though lingering in triumph, faltered. Her blue eyes widened, recognition flickering like a storm front breaking across the horizon. Mia turned too, and there he was, Owen Gordon. He stood in the entrance to the dining room, tall and composed, a man whose very presence commanded the space. The sharp lines of his tailored charcoal suit caught the light, his posture radiating authority. But his eyes, storm gray, darkened with fury, transfixed the room. Owen moved forward, each step measured and deliberate, the sound of his polished shoes against the marble floor, echoing like a verdict. He carried himself with the confidence of a man with nothing to prove. Yet his aura made it clear this confrontation would not end without reckoning. Patricia's face drained of color. The laughter that had once bubbled from her lips so easily was gone, replaced by a tight grimace of dread. "Owen," she stammered, her voice struggling for composure. I didn't realize." But Owen didn't glance at her. His gaze was fixed on Mia. He reached her side in 3 strides, his hand tender yet firm as it touched her shoulder. His thumb brushed against her skin, a silent reassurance reminding her she was not alone. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, the fury in his voice melting into concern only she could hear. Mia nodded, though her eyes shimmered. The redness of her cheeks spoke louder than words. Owen's jaw tightened. He turned then finally to Patricia. And when his gaze landed on her, the entire room seemed to tilt. "You struck my wife." His voice was quiet, but carried like a blade, each syllable cutting through the hushed room. "Here, in front of everyone." Patricia's lips parted, her hands fluttering helplessly at her sides. It was a misunderstanding. She was being difficult, and You laid your hands on her." Owen interrupted, the calmness of his tone more terrifying than any shout. "You humiliated her. In this restaurant. In my city." Gasps rippled through the diners. My city. It was not arrogance, but fact. Owen Gordon's influence in New York was legendary. From the glittering towers his company had built to the philanthropic ventures that bore his name, he was woven into the very fabric of the metropolis. Few dared to cross him. Fewer still escaped unscathed. Patricia tried to summon indignation, but her voice trembled. "Owen, please, I didn't know she was your wife." "If I had known," Owen's eyes flashed. "If you had known, you would have behaved differently." The question hung sharp and damning. Patricia flinched. Around them the other diners shifted uncomfortably. It was a question they all felt the weight of. Owen's tone sharpened iron beneath velvet. "Do you believe my wife deserves less dignity simply because you did not recognize her? Because she does not flaunt designer gowns or your kind of pedigree?" Patricia's silence was her answer. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her composure unraveling thread by thread. Mia sat still, every muscle trembling under the spotlight of 100 eyes. Yet she drew strength from Owen's presence, from the unwavering way he stood at her side. She reached for his hand beneath the table, her fingers curling into his. It was not just comfort, it was solidarity. Owen glanced down, meeting her eyes, and in that single look was a universe of vows. I will not let her break you. I will not let this stand. By now, the entire dining room was riveted. Men in tuxedos whispered to their wives. Socialites craned their necks to catch every word. Waiters lingered frozen in place trays, trembling in their hands. The Crown Manhattan had seen scandals, affairs, power plays, but never had it witnessed a scene like this. Patricia, sensing the collective judgment, attempted to recover. She forced a smile, brittle as glass. Owen, darling, surely this isn't worth making a scene. Let's move past it. I'll have a word with her privately, and you will not. Owen said, his voice like iron bars closing. The finality of it cracked the air. Patricia faltered, her practiced elegance dissolving into flustered panic. Owen straightened his hand, tightening around Mia's. He turned not only to Patricia, but to the room itself. Everyone here saw what happened, he said, his voice clear and resonant. A woman struck another woman because she judged her unworthy, because she decided that skin color, or clothing, or class gave her the right to humiliate someone she did not know. That is violence. That is cruelty. And it will not be ignored. His words rolled through the restaurant like waves, each sentence deliberate, unflinching. Some diners lowered their eyes in shame. Others nodded subtly, their faces lit with reluctant admiration. Patricia's face burned scarlet. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her power, built on whispers and unchecked arrogance, was dissolving beneath the harsh light of truth. For a moment, silence reigned. And then Mia, her voice soft but steady, spoke. Owen, she said, gently tugging his hand. Don't fight for me, as though I cannot speak for myself. The room held its breath. Mia turned her gaze to Patricia. You tried to make me small. You wanted to make me ashamed of who I am. But you failed. Because I know my worth, it does not come from money gowns or names whispered in Manhattan's upper circles. It comes from how I live, love, and stand. The words were not shouted, but they carried, filling the space with quiet dignity. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Subtle nods, softened gazes, the kind of recognition that could not be bought. Patricia's jaw clenched, fury and humiliation warring in her eyes. But she said nothing. Owen studied his wife, pride gleaming in his eyes. Then he turned back to Patricia, his voice low and dangerous. You owe my wife an apology. Patricia blinked, stunned. Excuse me? You heard me. Her lips twisted. You can't possibly expect. Now. The command in his tone brooked no argument. For the first time, Patricia Hamilton looked small, diminished not by circumstance, but by her cruelty laid bare. Around them, the room waited. Finally, through gritted teeth, Patricia murmured, I apologize. The words were brittle and empty, but hung in the air nonetheless. Mia met her eyes calmly. You don't have to apologize to me. You have to apologize to yourself for letting hate make you cruel. Patricia flinched, her mask cracking. The room's silence weighed heavily on her, the disapproval palpable. For once, she had no audience to applaud her theatrics. Owen guided Mia gently to her feet. We're leaving, he said, his arm protective around her shoulders. As they walked past the stunned crowd, whispers followed them. Admiration, shock, and above all, the recognition of a power far greater than money. The power of love defended with unflinching truth. Patricia stood alone, her hands trembling at her sides, her world tilting under the humiliation she had wrought upon herself. Outside, the night air of Manhattan wrapped around them, cool and sharp. Owen stopped, turning Mia toward him. His thumb brushed against her cheek, tracing the lingering heat where Patricia's hand had struck. "I should have been here sooner," he murmured. "I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Mia leaned into his touch, tears shimmering but unfallen. "You were here when it mattered." Their foreheads touched the city lights flickering around them. The world was only the two of them for a moment, united, unbreakable, standing tall against the storm. And behind them, in the glittering restaurant, the echo of their defiance lingered like a promise. This was only the beginning. The Bentley rolled quietly down Fifth Avenue, its tinted windows reflecting the glitter of the city lights. Inside, silence stretched taut between Owen and Mia, heavy and fragile. His hand remained wrapped around hers, thumb brushing across her knuckles in absent rhythm. But she could feel the tension coiled beneath his skin. His jaw was set too tightly, his eyes staring too hard at the blur of Manhattan passing outside. Mia sat beside him, still hearing the echo of Patricia Hamilton's voice in her head, the venom, the slap, the reluctant apology. The warmth of Owen's defense had carried her through the humiliation, but now doubt crept in like cold air through a cracked window in the quiet. She swallowed. "You shouldn't have had to do that," she whispered. Owen turned his gaze fierce. "I'll always do that. Always. No one touches you. No one insults you. Ever." But she shook her head, her eyes fixed on her lap. "I don't want to be the reason people whisper about you, about us. I don't want to be the scandal that follows your name." "Mia, I mean it," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "I chose that simple dress because I thought, maybe if I blended in, people wouldn't notice. But it doesn't matter what I wear. They'll always see me as different." Her words pierced him sharper than Patricia's hand ever could. He reached gently, lifting her chin so her eyes met his. "Different is what makes you extraordinary. Do you understand? I didn't marry someone to fit into their world. I married the woman who turned my world upside down." Mia searched his gaze, wanting to believe. But somewhere deep, the ache lingered. Their car pulled to a stop, not at their penthouse, but at the Gramercy Hotel. Tonight wasn't meant to end at the Crown. There was a gala afterwards, a benefit for Gordon Tech's new medical initiative. Owen had planned for them to attend together to appear as Manhattan's golden couple. As the valet opened her door, Mia hesitated. "Do we have to go in?" Owen's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "It's important. Investors, partners, they'll expect me. But if you want to go home, say the word." Mia shook her head. "No. If I leave now, Patricia will have won. I won't give her that." Pride flickered in his eyes. He kissed her hand, then led her inside. The gala was already in full swing. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, champagne, and music that drifted like silk over marble floors. The city's elite had gathered, politicians, entrepreneurs, socialites, each dressed in couture that screamed wealth and power. Mia walked beside Owen, her posture poised, her heart steady despite the storm within. She could feel eyes on her, measuring, weighing, whispering. But she held her head high, and every step was an act of quiet defiance. Owen guided her toward a circle of men in suits and women dripping diamonds. He spoke with effortless charm, his hand never leaving hers, grounding her. She smiled when introduced, her warmth disarming, her words thoughtful. The room seemed to soften for a moment, recognizing her not as an outsider, but as a force of her own. But not everyone welcomed her light. Across the ballroom, Patricia Hamilton reappeared. Her humiliation at the Crown had not broken her, but sharpened her. Dressed now in a crimson gown that glittered under the chandeliers, she cut through the crowd with the precision of a blade. Her smile was dazzling, but her eyes were knives. She stopped only feet away, her voice pitched just enough to carry. Well, well, if it isn't the woman of the hour. Mia's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. Owen's hand flexed against hers, protective. Patricia's smile widened. Mia, you certainly know how to make an entrance. First a slap in a restaurant, now paraded into a ballroom like... She paused, her gaze dripping disdain. Like a charity case, Owen resorted to polishing his public image. Gasps rippled quietly through the circle of onlookers. Owen stepped forward, fury radiating. Watch your mouth. But Patricia wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her voice honeyed yet sharp. Tell me, Mia, do you ever wonder? Do you ever wonder if he married you out of love or guilt? If you weren't simply his project, his good deed for the decade, Mia's breath caught. Patricia's tone dropped lower, intimate, cruel. Everyone knows, darling. You don't belong here. You're not his equal. You're a shadow clinging to the spotlight, and you'll disappear when it burns too bright. The words landed like daggers. For years, Mia had built armor against judgment, against whispers of where she came from, of what she looked like. But hearing it here in front of so many, spoken with such calculated venom, cracked something inside her. Her vision blurred. Her hand slipped from Owen's. She turned away, pressing through the crowd, as murmurs rose around her. Mia Owen's voice followed, low but urgent. She didn't stop. She couldn't. She found her way onto the terrace, the night air biting against her skin. Manhattan stretched before her, glittering and endless, but her chest felt tight, her breath shallow. Patricia's words echoed mercilessly. Not his equal. A charity case. You don't belong. Her hands trembled against the stone railing. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back, furious with herself. She had promised not to break, not to give Patricia the satisfaction. And yet here she was, shattered under the weight of poisoned words. The terrace doors opened, and Owen stepped out, his presence immediate grounding. Mia, he said softly, approaching her like she was something fragile he couldn't risk breaking further. She shook her head, voice cracking. Don't. Not right now. He stopped, giving her space, his eyes searching hers. She doesn't know you. She doesn't know us. Don't let her take this from you. Mia let out a bitter laugh, though it wavered. Maybe she doesn't have to know me. Perhaps she's right. I walk into these rooms and feel it every glance, every whisper. They're all waiting for me to prove her words true. Owen moved closer, his voice low, steady. Listen to me. You are not here because of me. You're here because you are Mia Norris. The woman who taught me that success without purpose is empty. The woman who made me believe in love that isn't calculated or strategic. You are more than my equal. You are my compass. His hand hovered near hers, waiting for her to take it. Mia turned toward him, her eyes brimming. I want to believe that. I do. But when she said it, Owen, it felt like she pulled the thoughts straight from my head. What if... Her voice trembled. What if she's only saying what I already fear? His chest ached at her words. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed her hand to his heart. Do you feel that? It beats for you. Only you. And if you can't silence the doubt tonight, let me silence it for you again and again, for as long as it takes. Her tears slipped free then, but she didn't look away. She let herself lean into him, her cheek against his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, anchoring her in the chaos. When at last they re-entered the ballroom, hand in hand, the atmosphere shifted. Patricia was still there. Her glass of champagne untouched, her eyes sharp with expectation. She had hoped Mia would crumble retreat leave. Instead, Mia returned with Owen's hand firmly in hers and her head held high. The whispers rippled again, but admiration was threaded among them this time. Strength, dignity, resilience. They could see it now, whether they wanted to or not. Patricia's smirk faltered. Later, as the gala continued, Owen leaned close to Mia's ear. "This isn't over," he murmured. "Patricia won't stop, but neither will I, and neither will you." Mia squeezed his hand, her voice calm but resolute. "Then let her try. She can't break what's already stronger than her hate." Mia felt something flicker inside her for the first time that evening. Not doubt, not fear, but fire. The battle lines were quietly drawn as the orchestra swelled and chandeliers glittered overhead. Patricia Hamilton had unleashed her cruelty, but in doing so, she had awakened something deeper in Mia Norris, a strength no insult could extinguish. And while the night was far from over, one truth had become unshakable. Love once tested had the power to become unbreakable. The ballroom glittered with all the pomp of Manhattan wealth, gilded chandeliers, scattering light across marble floors, crystal flutes clinking as servers glided between clusters of power and influence. To an outsider, it was a painting of perfection. But beneath the shimmer, tension hummed like an undercurrent, waiting to break its banks. Mia could feel it in her skin, the way conversation stalled as she passed, the way laughter carried an edge sharper than it should. The earlier confrontation with Patricia had not been forgotten. If anything, it had become fuel. Gossip traveled swiftly in such rooms, faster than champagne, more intoxicating than the music. She stayed close to Owen, her hand steady in his, though her chest still held the tremor of Patricia's words. Each smile she offered, each greeting she returned, was an act of resistance, a declaration that she belonged by his side, not by privilege, but by choice. But she also knew Patricia was not finished. Owen's voice was low, his lips brushing her temple as he leaned to speak. "You don't have to prove anything here. Not to them." "I know," Mia answered, though the words felt heavier than she intended. "But part of me wants to." He looked at her, then his eyes carrying the weight of love and caution. He knew her pride and strength, and the cruelty of those who circled their lives like vultures. Tonight, he would have to be her shield, or let her be her sword. Across the room, Patricia Hamilton stood like a queen in exile. The crimson gown she wore gleamed under the chandeliers, and though her lips carried a smile, her eyes betrayed a storm unquelled. Every whisper that drifted her way, every glance cast in her direction, reminded her of the slap she had delivered, and the humiliation that had followed when Owen Gordon named Mia as his wife before the entire restaurant. For Patricia, tonight was about reclaiming her power. It happened swiftly. One moment, Mia and Owen were in the midst of a conversation with a senator and his wife. The next, Patricia had cut through the crowd with the precision of a dagger. "Well," Patricia said, "what a charming picture you two make," her tone syrup sweet, but edged with poison. Owen's jaw hardened. "Patricia, not tonight." But she ignored him, her attention fixed on Mia. "You know, my dear, I admire your courage. Truly. To step into these rooms wearing—" Her gaze swept Mia from head to toe, lingering on the simplicity of her navy gown. Something so modest. "It's brave to dress as if you've just come from a church choir rather than a gala." Mia held her ground, refusing to flinch. "I chose what I'm comfortable with. That's enough for me." Patricia's smile sharpened. "Comfortable. Yes. Perhaps that's what Owen saw in you. A comfortable project. Something to fix, to polish. We all know how he loves his ventures. But tell me, darling, when the novelty fades, what will you be then? A trophy? Or just forgotten? Gasps rippled among the gathered guests, drawn like moths to the flame of spectacle. The senator coughed, shifting uncomfortably, but no one intervened. No one ever did. Owen stepped forward, his voice ice. "You're out of line." Patricia's eyes gleamed. "Am I? Or am I the only one willing to say what others whisper?" She turned to the crowd, her words deliberately louder now. "Do none of you wonder that this marriage is less about love and more about image? That our dear Owen Gordon chose not a partner, but a convenient story?" Then came the word. Ugly sharp, dressed in silk, but cutting deep. Gold digger. The silence that followed was deafening. Glasses stilled mid-air. Music seemed to falter. Every eye was on Mia. Her heart stopped just for a beat, as the word coiled around her like chains. She had heard it before, always in whispers, always from afar. But here, flung at her like a weapon in front of Manhattan's most powerful, it felt like a brand seared onto her skin. Owen's fury erupted. "Enough!" His voice thundered, commanding the room. He moved so quickly that several guests flinched, expecting violence. His hand clenched at his side, his body taut with restrained rage. But Mia placed her hand lightly on his arm. Her touch was soft, but her gaze was steady. "No, Owen," she said quietly, though her voice carried. "Not this time. Let me." She stepped forward, the crowd parting instinctively, as if they sensed something monumental about to unfold. Her voice was calm, but beneath it pulsed a fire that could not be extinguished. "You call me a gold digger, Patricia. But let's talk about what gold means, shall we? Gold is wealth. Gold is power. Gold is the currency this city worships. But I don't need Owen's gold to define me." Her eyes swept the crowd, daring them to meet her gaze. "I had a life before him, a career, a family, dreams. I survived hardships you wouldn't survive a day in. And when I met Owen, I didn't see a bank account. I saw a man who listened when I spoke, believed in me when I doubted myself, and loved me without asking me to become someone else." She turned back to Patricia, her voice cutting like glass. "So if loving someone with everything I am and being loved makes me a gold digger, I'll wear that title proudly, because it means I value something far rarer than money. It means I value love." The ballroom was silent, utterly spellbound. Patricia's smile faltered, the mask slipping, as the weight of Mia's words landed. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. Owen stepped beside Mia, his presence unwavering. "You will not speak to my wife again," he said, his voice a final verdict. But Mia's voice lingered, echoing in every corner of the ballroom. Guests whispered now, but the tone had shifted from scandal to admiration, doubt to respect. Patricia's crimson gown suddenly seemed too heavy, her jewels too gaudy, her power too fragile. She raised her chin, forcing a smirk. Touching. But words don't change what people think. Mia's reply was quiet, resolute. "No, but they can change what people remember." And in that moment, the tide shifted. Patricia had come to destroy, but instead she had revealed her cruelty. Mia had not just defended herself, she had commanded the room. Owen led Mia to a quieter corner as the orchestra resumed and conversations cautiously restarted. His hand enveloped hers, his eyes burning with both pride and concern. "You were extraordinary," he murmured. "I should have silenced her sooner." Mia shook her head. "If you had, they would have remembered your anger. Instead, they'll remember my voice." He looked at her, a mixture of awe and love, softening his features. "And that's why you are the strongest person I know." Mia leaned into him, then her strength no longer just an armor, but a flame burning steady and bright. She had been called a gold digger, in front of 100 witnesses, but she had transformed the insult into something unbreakable. For the first time that night, she felt not just like she belonged, but like she had claimed her place undeniable and fierce. Patricia across the room lifted her glass with a trembling hand. Her eyes burned with hatred, but beneath it lurked fear, because she had realized something. Mia Norris was not a woman to be broken, and Owen Gordon would move heaven and earth to protect her fire. The war was far from over, but the first actual battle had been won. The night had moved on, at least on the surface. The orchestra swelled again, glasses clinked, and the crowd tried to recapture the easy rhythm of celebration. But beneath the glitter of chandeliers, whispers still trailed in the air like smoke refusing to disperse. Mia could feel the stares, the lingering curiosity in every gaze that brushed over her. She had stood her ground against Patricia's venom, turned an insult into a proclamation of love. But victory had its price. The ballroom was a stage, and she remained under its merciless spotlight. Owen's hand never left hers. His grip was warm and steady, reminding her that he was the anchor of her heart, needed no matter the audience or the storm. Yet in his eyes, she could see the quiet fury, still smoldering fury at Patricia, at the cruelty she wielded like a weapon. And Mia knew Patricia wasn't done. From across the room, Patricia stood with a glass of champagne she hardly sipped. Her crimson gown clung to her like armor, her smile sculpted into something gracious for the onlookers. But her eyes, icy calculating, never left Mia. When she finally moved, it was with the poise of a woman who had rehearsed her next strike. She glided into the circle of conversations, her words soft, her laughter cultured, but her daggers sharpened beneath. Soon whispers shifted, heads tilted. Guests leaned closer to her, their eyes widening with curiosity, their lips curling with intrigue. Mia felt it before she heard it, the weight of a secret leaving Patricia's lips and unfurling through the ballroom like poison. "Did you know?" Patricia said, her voice pitched just right for her cluster of listeners, "that our lovely Mia grew up in Baltimore. Yes, in a neighborhood most of us wouldn't dare set foot in. Her father ran into trouble with the law, if I recall, and her mother worked herself ragged to keep the lights on. Admirable, really, but hardly the pedigree one expects at this table." The words slithered outward, carried by the eagerness of those who fed on scandal. What began as whispers became murmurs, and what were murmurs became a low tide of speculation rising across the ballroom. Mia felt the heat at the back of her neck as conversations shifted around her, the glances growing sharper, more invasive. It wasn't enough that Patricia had insulted her. Now she was pulling open the raw seams of her past for the world to examine. Mia's chest tightened. Baltimore. The row houses where rain leaked through broken roofs. The nights when sirens sang her to sleep. The mornings when her mother's hands trembled with exhaustion, yet still braided Mia's hair before school. She remembered clutching textbooks like lifelines, studying by flickering lamplight because power bills went unpaid. She remembered her father, the shadow of him, more than the man himself who vanished behind bars when she was too young to understand why. The shame she carried for years, the judgment in teachers' eyes when they whispered about her family, the way she fought to prove she was more than where she came from. Now that history lay exposed, stripped bare, not as a triumph, but as a weapon turned against her. Beside her, Owen stiffened. He could hear it too, the venom disguised as gossip. His eyes narrowed, a storm brewing, his instinct to cut Patricia down with the sheer force of his authority. But Mia touched his arm, stopping him. Her hand lingered, trembling, but determined. "Don't," she whispered. "Not yet." Her voice shook, but her gaze was steady. She knew what Patricia was doing, and she knew that silence, or Owen's fury, would only feed the narrative. If she was to survive this, she had to face it herself. When Patricia finally drew close again, her smile perfectly polished, Mia straightened her back and met her gaze head-on. "Baltimore," Mia said clearly, her voice carrying over the hum of the crowd. "Yes, that's where I grew up." The room hushed, attention snapping to her as though the orchestra had fallen silent. Patricia's smile twitched, surprised by the bluntness, but Mia pressed on, her voice low but unwavering. "My father made mistakes. Mistakes that cost him his freedom. My mother worked 3 jobs so I could get a better chance. I studied harder than anyone I knew because I refused to let poverty define me. And yes, I came from nothing, but I will never be ashamed of it." Her words rang out, not defensive, but declarative, each syllable a stone laid into the foundation of her dignity. The guests who had leaned into Patricia's story moments ago now found themselves shifting uncomfortably. Some looked away, ashamed of their curiosity. Others regarded Mia with something new, something like respect. Owen's chest swelled with pride as he looked at her, his wife standing in the fire without flinching. She hadn't denied her past. She had owned it, transformed it, elevated it into proof of her resilience. Patricia's smirk faltered, though she tried to recover. "Well, how inspiring, truly. But surely you can see how unusual it is for a woman from such roots to find herself in a world like this." "Unusual," Mia said softly, her eyes never leaving Patricia's. "But not impossible. And that is what frightens you. A woman not born into privilege can stand beside Owen Gordon and know she belongs." The words landed like a blow. Patricia's jaw tightened, her hands clenching around her glass. Owen stepped forward, then his voice cutting through the silence like thunder. "When I met Mia, I didn't care where she came from. I cared who she was. The strongest, kindest, most brilliant woman I've ever known. And if anyone here believes her past diminishes her worth, her past diminishes her worth. Let me be clear. You are not worthy to stand in her presence." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but none dared challenge him. Owen Gordon's reputation was iron, and his words carried the weight of truth. Mia's hand tightened around his gratitude, and love flooding through her. Together they stood united, not just against Patricia, but against the notion that love could be measured in wealth or status. Patricia's mask cracked. For once she had no retort, polished insult, or weapon left in her arsenal. She had bared Mia's past as a means of humiliation, but Mia had claimed it as a crown. The room turned from her attention, shifting back to the couple she had tried to dismantle. Her isolation was palpable, her once commanding presence reduced to a shadow against the brilliance of Mia's strength and Owen's unwavering devotion. She lifted her glass with trembling fingers, the champagne suddenly bitter on her tongue. As the orchestra resumed its rhythm and conversations slowly rekindled, Mia and Owen found themselves in a quiet pocket amid the chaos. He leaned close, his forehead brushing hers. "You amaze me," he whispered. Mia smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "I was terrified. You didn't look it, because you were beside me." The simplicity of her words and their truth pierced him deeper than any grand declaration. He kissed her hand, reverent, as though sealing a vow unspoken. Later that night, as they left the ballroom, the city stretched before them, its lights fierce and unyielding like the two. Mia paused at the doors, looking back once. Patricia stood alone in the center of the grand hall, her smile brittle, her empire of whispers collapsing around her. For the first time, Mia felt no shame in her past, no trembling fear of judgment. She was no longer just defending herself, but claiming her place, voice, and truth. And Owen, hand in hers, was the proof that love had nothing to do with where she came from, and everything to do with where they were going together. The morning after the gala, Manhattan awoke, not to the usual rhythm of rushing taxis and coffee carts, but to headlines that blazed like fire across digital screens and glossy papers. Owen Gordon's new wife, from Baltimore's shadows to Manhattan's penthouse. Gold digger or survivor? The story behind the Gordon marriage. Each headline echoed Patricia's whispers, now amplified by journalists eager for scandal. Articles dissected Mia's past with surgical cruelty, her father's imprisonment, her mother's exhaustion, her neighborhood's broken streets. Photos of her childhood row house appeared beside images of her in Owen's arms, the contrast weaponized for intrigue. And though Mia had spoken her truth the night before, there was something more ruthless about seeing it in print, stripped of her voice, twisted into entertainment for strangers. The penthouse kitchen, usually filled with warmth, the aroma of coffee, the sizzle of eggs, was unnervingly silent. Mia sat at the marble counter, a tablet before her, the screen flooded with headlines. She didn't touch her coffee. Her hands curled around the cup, only to stop the tremor. Owen entered crisp in his morning suit, his tie undone, as if his practiced composure faltered. He had already seen the papers and fielded 3 calls from his PR team, but none of that mattered compared to the sight of Mia. Her shoulders tense, her eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. "They're vultures," Owen said, his voice taut with restrained anger, every last one of them. "I'll sue. I'll make them retract every word." Mia shook her head slowly. "You can't sue the truth, Owen. Everything they wrote, it happened. They're not lying. They're just twisting it." Her words were calm, but their quiet ache pierced him deeper than rage ever could. She pushed the tablet aside, unable to look anymore. "I thought I was past it, Owen. I thought if I worked hard enough and built a new life, the past would stop following me. But now it's everywhere. My father's name, my mother's sacrifices. Things I carried like scars, they've turned into spectacles." Her eyes glistened, but she fought the tears. "And people don't see me. They see a headline. They see a girl from Baltimore who doesn't belong in your world." Owen's chest tightened, his hands gripping the counter as if anchoring himself. He wanted to tell her she belonged more than anyone. She was stronger than the men and women who filled those newspapers with venom. She was the center of his world, not an accessory. But words, he realized, might not be enough this time. By noon, it became clear this wasn't just gossip. It was orchestrated. Patricia fed the press, gave them the story, and painted Mia's life in colors meant to shame rather than inspire. Anonymous sources close to the Gordon family spoke of Owen's impulsive marriage doubts, whispered behind closed doors, and an empire at risk because of one woman's background. It wasn't just Mia under attack. It was Owen's judgment company's stability and reputation as Manhattan's most disciplined billionaire. Board members called. Investors questioned. The story spread beyond the tabloids into financial columns, raising doubts about the Gordon empire. And through it all, Patricia remained invisible. Her name never appearing, her fingerprints hidden, but undeniable. By evening, the pressure pressed in like a vice. Owen paced the penthouse, his phone buzzing endlessly with calls he ignored. Mia sat near the window, the city lights spilling around her like broken stars. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe Patricia's right." Owen froze. "Don't. Think about it, Owen. Look at what's happening. The board is questioning you. The press is tearing me apart. What if this marriage does cost you everything?" Her voice cracked low and raw. "What if loving me is a mistake?" The words gutted him. He turned, crossing the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees before her, as if the weight of her doubt demanded he lower himself. "Mia, look at me." His hands cradled hers, firm, desperate. "You are not a mistake. You are the best decision I've ever made. The rest, the headlines, the board. Patricia, they're noise. I don't care if I lose every cent, every company, every so-called ally. I will not lose you. Her eyes brimmed with tears, her composure breaking, her walls crumbling in the face of his certainty. In the stillness of his vow, Mia's mind returned to a memory she rarely shared: a night in Baltimore, when the roof leaked so badly, she woke to find her mattress soaked. She had sat on the floor with a candle stub shivering, trying to finish homework on damp pages. Her mother, exhausted, had knelt beside her, cupping her face. "You're not where you come from, baby," her mother had whispered. "You're where you're going. Don't you ever forget that." Those words now returned not as comfort, but as fire. Patricia could try to weaponize her past, the press could spin it into a scandal, but the truth remained: she was not defined by it. She had fought too hard, survived too much to let anyone dictate her worth. And Owen's hands around hers were proof that she was not alone in this fight. She drew a breath, steadying herself. "Then we fight differently, Owen. Not with silence, not with anger. We tell our story before Patricia tells it for us." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "We go public. An interview, a speech. Something where I speak not as a headline or gossip, but as myself. If they want to know who I am, I'll show them. Not the broken version Patricia feeds them. The truth." Owen studied her pride blooming in his chest, even amid the storm. "You do that? Step into the fire again?" She nodded, her voice firm, because it's the only way to burn her lies down. Across the city, Patricia sipped her wine in her Upper East Side apartment, the news glowing from her television, the headlines painting Mia as she had intended. She reclined like a queen, convinced her victory was inevitable. "She'll never survive this," Patricia murmured almost tenderly to the empty room. "A woman like that can't withstand Manhattan's cruelty. She'll fold. And when she does, Owen will realize what a mistake he's made." But she underestimated Mia Norris. Later, in the quiet of their bedroom, Owen and Mia lay side by side. The storm outside the windows rattled against the glass, echoing the storm inside their lives. Owen brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "You shouldn't have to do this, to bare yourself to people who don't deserve to know you." Mia turned to him, her gaze steady. "Maybe they don't deserve it, but I deserve to be heard. My mother's sacrifices deserve to be honored. My story isn't something to be ashamed of, Owen. It's something to claim." He kissed her forehead, pulling her close. "Then we do it together. Every word, every step, you won't stand alone." And for the first time since the headlines broke, Mia slept soundly, her heart steady against his. The next morning dawned, gray rain streaking the glass of the penthouse windows. The city moved as it always did, fast, relentless, indifferent. But within the Gordon home, a decision had been made. Mia stood before the mirror, her reflection calm, resolute. She no longer saw the girl from Baltimore, who carried shame like a secret. She saw a woman ready to turn her scars into armor, her story into light. Behind her, Owen adjusted his tie, his eyes never leaving her. In his gaze, she saw not pity, not fear, only devotion, fierce and unyielding. Together they stepped toward the storm Patricia had unleashed. Together they would face it not as billionaires and wives, not as scandals and victims, but as partners bound by a love stronger than any headline. The rain had stopped by noon, leaving Manhattan washed in a pale silver light. Skyscrapers shimmered like sharpened glass, their edges softened by the mist that clung to the avenues below. The world outside moved with its usual indifference, yellow cabs rushing umbrellas, closing the city roaring. But for Mia, this day was anything but ordinary. She stood before the full-length mirror in the penthouse dressing room, her palms pressed against the silk fabric of her navy sheath dress. It wasn't new, nor was it extravagant. It was the same dress she had worn to her first fundraiser dinner with Owen, The night she had dared to step into his world, not as a bystander, but as his equal. Today, she would step into the fire wearing it again, not as a symbol of wealth, but as proof of her resilience. Behind her, Owen leaned against the doorway, his tie loose, his expression calm but protective. "You're sure about this?" Mia turned, her reflection fading as her gaze met his. "If I don't tell my story, Patricia wins. She turns my past into her weapon. I won't let her." He crossed the room, his hand brushing her cheek, his thumb lingering against her jawline, as if he could steady her heartbeat with his touch alone. "Then I'll be beside you. Always." The television studio was colder than she expected, the cold that seeps into bones, designed perhaps to keep the lights from overheating. Bright white panels framed the set, the polished desk gleaming beneath cameras that loomed like watchful eyes. The journalist, Evelyn Moore, greeted them warmly, but with the sharp curiosity of someone who had built her career on asking questions that cut through to the marrow. "Mia Owen, thank you for agreeing to this. You know it won't be easy." Mia smiled faintly, her nerves wrapped tight, but her resolve intact. "I don't need easy. I need honesty." Evelyn studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then let's give them honesty." The cameras rolled. The red light blinked. The world, or at least a significant slice of it, turned its gaze to Mia Norris. Evelyn's voice was smooth, practiced. "Mia, in the past 24 hours, stories about your background have filled the headlines. Words like gold digger have been used. Some have questioned whether you belong in Owen Gordon's life in this world. How do you respond?" The silence that followed felt endless. Mia inhaled the weight of every headline pressing against her ribs. But when she spoke, her voice carried not with tremor, but clarity. "I respond by saying they're right about one thing. I don't come from this world. I wasn't raised in penthouses or ballrooms. I grew up in Baltimore, where we measured wealth by how long the lights stayed on, not by how many cars were parked in the driveway." She paused, her eyes steady on the camera. "My father made mistakes. My mother worked herself to exhaustion trying to hold us together. And yes, I carry those scars. But scars don't mean shame. They mean survival. And survival taught me resilience, compassion, and a strength I wouldn't trade for anything." Owen's gaze never left her, pride radiating from him like a shield. He hadn't spoken yet, but the world didn't need his words. It required hers. Evelyn leaned in, intrigued. "So when people say you married Owen for money, for status?" Mia smiled softly, not bitterly, but with the warmth of someone disarming a blade with her bare hands. "They misunderstand what wealth means. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy kindness. It can't buy loyalty. It can't buy how Owen listens to me when no one else does, or how he sees me not as a story to exploit, but as a partner to cherish. That's what I married. Not his bank account, not his empire him." Evelyn's professional detachment slipped for the first time since the storm began. Her lips curved ever so slightly. That's a powerful answer. But Evelyn was not one to stop at sympathy. She shifted the conversation. "Mia, you've entered a world where people wield power like a weapon. Patricia Hamilton, for example, has been accused of leaking these stories. Do you fear women like her?" Mia's eyes darkened, but not with fear, with resolve. "No, because women like Patricia believe power is something you hoard, something you use to belittle others. But real power," she lifted her chin, "real power is using your story to lift others. If Patricia thinks she can break me by dragging out my past, she's wrong. Because every young woman reading those headlines who comes from where I come from, she'll see me standing here, unbroken. And maybe she'll realize her story doesn't define her limits either." The studio was silent. Even Evelyn seemed taller, as if Mia's fire had spread beyond the camera lens. It was then that Owen leaned forward, his voice deep, unwavering. "I want to add something." The camera turned the billionaire whose silence had been interpreted as arrogance or guilt, now speaking not with corporate polish, but with raw truth. "I fell in love with Mia because she challenges me, because she makes me better than the man I was before. If anyone thinks she doesn't belong in this world, they're right, because she belongs in something greater. She belongs in a world we haven't built yet, where love and integrity matter more than privilege and gossip. And I will spend the rest of my life creating that world with her." Mia's breath caught her heart thundering, but she didn't falter. She let his words wrap around her like armor, steadying her, as the cameras captured a truth that could not be spun. By the time the interview ended, phones buzzed across the city. Social media erupted not with scorn, but with admiration. Clips of Mia's words spread like wildfire. Scars don't mean shame. They mean survival. Hashtags trended not Patricia's insults, but Mia's resilience. Young women shared their own stories. Mothers wrote messages of solidarity, and even hardened journalists called it the interview that silenced the scandal. Patricia's carefully laid trap had turned against her. In her gilded apartment, Patricia poured another glass of wine, her eyes fixed on the screen. She had expected Mia to break falter and crumble beneath the glare of public scrutiny. Instead, she watched as the woman she despised transformed the wound into a crown, the insult into a banner. Patricia's hand trembled as she set the glass down too hard, red wine spilling across the marble. She didn't wipe it. Her eyes narrowed, rage simmering, but a seed of fear took root beneath it. Because now it was not just Owen's love that made Mia untouchable. It was the world beginning to believe in her too. When the studio lights dimmed and the cameras powered down, Mia exhaled, her chest light, yet trembling. Owen took her hand, pressing it to his lips, as if to thank her for surviving and shining. "You were magnificent," he whispered. She smiled faintly, exhaustion settling in. "I was terrified. And yet you were stronger than anyone in that room. Stronger than me." She leaned into him, then the adrenaline fading, replaced by the quiet intimacy of two people who had faced the world together and emerged not unscarred, but victorious. As they returned to the penthouse that evening, the city below sparkled in its endless hum. Mia stood by the window, her reflection mingling with the skyline. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like fire. Owen wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice low. "The world knows who you are now. Not their version. Yours." Mia closed her eyes, resting her head against his chest. "And that's all I ever wanted." The storm had not ended. Patricia would not disappear, but the battlefield had shifted, and Mia Norris had claimed her place not just in Owen's life, but in the world's memory. The night sky above Manhattan glimmered with cold stars, which seemed more like distant sparks than promises of light. The city thrummed with its usual electricity sirens, wailing horns, echoing neon signs blinking like restless eyes. But inside the penthouse high above it all, Mia felt the kind of silence that comes only before a storm. She stood by the window, her hand resting on the cool glass, her reflection wavering against the skyline. Owen was behind her, pacing slowly, his tie undone, his gaze sharp with calculation. He had spent the day fielding calls, cutting contracts, and drawing lines. But even as the empire bent to his will, one shadow refused to fall away. Patricia Hamilton. The woman had not vanished into disgrace as expected. If anything, her desperation had only sharpened her claws. By nightfall, rumors swirled that she had uncovered new leverage, something darker, more personal. She's not finished, Mia whispered. Owen stopped pacing, crossing the room to stand behind her. His hands found her shoulders, grounding her. She doesn't get to decide our story, Mia. Not anymore. But Mia shook her head, her voice low. People like Patricia never stop unless someone makes them. 2 nights later, they were summoned, not by invitation, but by inevitability. Patricia had orchestrated a gala at the Astoria, inviting media politicians and CEOs. The pretense was charity, but everyone knew it was a stage, and the act would be Mia. Owen wanted to refuse. It's a trap, he muttered, tightening his cufflinks with frustration. Mia, however, was calm. Then let's walk into it. But this time, we'll decide how the story ends. She wore white that evening, not extravagant, not jeweled, but a simple flowing gown that seemed to carry light with every step. It was the kind of dress that whispered dignity without screaming wealth, a dress that could not be mistaken for anything but her choice. When they entered the ballroom, conversation halted. Heads turned. Patricia's eyes gleamed like a predator's across the polished floor, her glass raised as if to toast their arrival. The night unfolded, as if choreographed. Patricia charmed the crowd, weaving stories thick with venom disguised as wit. She alluded to Mia's past, twisted facts into barbs, and each word aimed to slice deeper. Finally, she dropped her weapon. It's almost poetic. The billionaire with everything falling for a woman with nothing. A charity case elevated to a queen. Tell me, Mia, how does playing dress up in a life that was never yours feel? The crowd held its breath. Mia did not flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her voice steady, carrying across the ballroom without a microphone. It feels like the truth, because this life isn't yours to grant me. Patricia, it isn't borrowed. It's built from every scar I carry, every night I refuse to give up, every morning I chose to rise again. Owen didn't rescue me. He found me already standing. And together, we stand taller. A ripple moved through the guests. Patricia's smile faltered, her carefully crafted mask cracking under the weight of words that no insult could erase. Owen joined Mia at her side, his presence a wall of certainty. He looked directly at Patricia, his voice cold as glass. This ends tonight. Your contracts with Gordon Tech are void. Your influence is done. You wanted to expose Mia, congratulations. You've only exposed yourself. Gasps erupted. Phones lit up. The story had shifted in real time, not against Mia, but against Patricia. Her cruelty was no longer gossip, but spectacle witnessed by those who held power she could no longer manipulate. Patricia's hand shook as she set her glass down too hard, red wine splashing across her gown. In that single trembling gesture, the woman who had wielded fear like a blade looked suddenly small. Yet Mia did not press the final blow with cruelty. She stepped closer, her voice softer. Not for Patricia, but for the world listening. You tried to break me because you believed love like ours couldn't exist. But it does, and it isn't fragile. It's not about money or power or names. It's about seeing one another fully and choosing each other even when the world says we shouldn't. Her gaze swept the crowd, meeting the eyes of strangers who leaned closer, listening not to scandal, but truth. I chose Owen. I select our love, our life, our future, and no rumor, no insult, no act of hate will change that. The ballroom erupted in applause, not polite, but fierce, unrestrained. By the following morning, headlines no longer carried Patricia's narrative. They had Mia's words. I choose us. Shares in Gordon Tech soared. Politicians who had once hesitated now reached out eager to align with a man and woman who had become symbols of resilience and integrity. Patricia Hamilton disappeared from the public eye. Her empire fractured, her name whispered only as a cautionary tale. But for Mia and Owen, victory wasn't in the collapse of an enemy. It was in the quiet moments that followed. Weeks later, on a Sunday morning, Mia sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the city. The air was crisp, the horizon painted gold by dawn. Owen came out with 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her before sinking into the chair opposite. He studied her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You've changed everything you know." Mia looked at him, her eyes warm, certain. "No, we did." Their fingers intertwined across the table with no cameras and no audience, just 2 hearts that had weathered storms and chosen to remain bound together. That night, as the city pulsed with life below, Owen drew Mia close in the dim light of their room. His voice was soft against her hair. "For all the power I thought I had, the truth is you're my strength. You're my home." Mia smiled, her hand pressed against his chest, feeling the rhythm of the life they had built. "And you're mine." The world outside would always be restless, loud, judgmental. But here, in the quiet between their breaths, there was only love. And that love was enough. Stories like Mia and Owen's remind us that love, resilience, and truth can defy even the sharpest storms. If their journey touched your heart, if you saw a piece of yourself in their struggle and their triumph, let this story continue to live through you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let your voice be part of this conversation. And if you wish to walk alongside us in more stories of love, courage, and second chances, don't forget to like this video and follow the channel. Because every time you do, you become part of a family that believes, just as Owen and Mia do, that love is stronger than fear, and truth will always find its way.